The sound of terror gripped a Texas courtroom as an officer stands trial for inaction during a school massacre, and an Ohio manhunt intensifies for the person who killed a dentist and his wife, leaving kids alive in the home. We're following the latest. And in Los Angeles, jail officials update Nick Reiner's status behind bars as his arraignment looms for his parents' murder case. In the court of law, everything is done for the day. Court has adjourned, so let's call to order Court of Opinion. Welcome to Court of Opinion. I'm Julia Janae. Thank you for joining us tonight. This hour, we are going to begin in Texas, where opening statements got underway for the trial of a former Uvalde, Texas school police officer accused of not doing more to save lives in the 2022 massacre that left 19 students and 2 teachers dead. Adrian Gonzales pleaded not guilty to 29 counts of child abandonment or endangerment. This is following the attack at Robb Elementary School. He's accused of putting children in imminent danger of injury or death. And they say that he didn't engage, distract, or delay the shooter by not following his training. These allegations also say that he didn't go toward the gunfire despite hearing the shots and being told the shooter's specific location. Terrified students inside of those classrooms, they called 911, and parents outside begged for intervention by officers. An investigation ultimately found 77 minutes passed from the time authorities arrived until a tactical team breached a classroom and killed the shooter, identified as Salvador Ramos. In case you missed it, let's get you caught up on the highlights from opening statements today with our daily wrap.
So you see him shooting at children, and then what happened?
And then I just remember him going through the classrooms, and he started shooting in window by window until he got to the door where he walked in through. At that point, I just, was begging 911 to please get officers out there, and then I saw a police officer arrive, and I was telling him he entered through that door. And that's the door that he entered through.
Oh my God! He's jumping into the schoolyard. Into the schoolyard? Yes, he just jumped up on the fence. He's running toward the school. He's wearing black. There's kids out there, please. Oh my God. Lord, please, protect these children. Oh my God, in the name of Jesus.
What did you do after the awards?
We went back to the classroom for a little bit, and then until it was time for them to go to rotation at the library. After I dropped them off, I went to a math interventionist room until it was time to pick my kids up from the library, and I actually picked them up about 10-15 minutes early that day so we could have extra recess.
What is it that disturbs your playground activity?
We heard sounds, and to me, I thought that they were fireworks. And then I walked to, they had like bleachers in the middle of the playground so I could see my kids, and I didn't make it there until Coach Gonzales picked up his radio and started yelling for us to get inside.
Okay, so the combination of hearing these fireworks from Coach Gonzales, did you draw a conclusion from that?
Yes.
And what was that?
That there was gunfire. As we were all running into the classroom, I saw I don't know what to call him, horrible person, walking.
Just take your time. We can hold on.
Walking towards the door.
Can you describe him for us?
He had all black, long hair, and a gun.
At some point, you were relieved or you evacuated. Is that
Yes.
correct? Tell us about that.
We kept hearing knocking on the door, and we were taught, don't answer the door. Somebody will come in and get you. But after several times knocking, and again, I was on the opposite side of the room. One of the teachers, she peeked open the curtain to see, I guess, who it was. And it was law enforcement. And so at that point, she opened the door, they came and said, we're going to move you guys to the parking lot. We sat there for a little bit and then ended up going to an empty field off of campus, and while we waited for buses, I still at this point didn't have all of my students, and so I gathered the ones that I did have, and I told them, stay here, we're not getting on this bus, and waited.
For what?
For the rest of my kids.
A tough day inside of that courtroom for everyone involved. Adrian Gonzales could be sentenced to a maximum of 58 years in prison if he is convicted. We want to bring in our guest panel who is standing by. Joining me in studio tonight, we have a power panel for you. Criminal defense attorney Josh Schiffer, criminal defense investigator Charles Milstead, and joining us remotely, former deputy public defender of LA County, Philip Dubé. We promised and delivered that we would have an intense panel to talk about some really tough subjects today. So it's great to see you all. And Josh, you're already looking like you want to answer. So I'm going to start with you on this one. Your opinion of where we are in this case.
We are in the opening act of theater, of absolute theater, because what we are witnessing here is an attack and an assault on some of our first responders, of the people that we ask to protect us, because I don't see a crime being committed, by this officer. Was there maybe dereliction of duty? Was there refusal to follow training? Yes, but to criminalize his failure to act, I've got a big problem with that.
All right, Charles, from the security career standpoint, you have that active shooting training over the course of your career. What is this in terms of whether he should have done more?
Well, first of all, he's in the process. What it seems like is he's being scapegoated now for knowledge that we have subsequently learned that we expected him to act on in real time. And there's an assessment that takes place. And just because you have a witness that may point out that there's a potential shooter walking into a school or a suspicious person, initially it seems like he's investigating what he thinks is a crash, and he's trying to understand what's going on. He doesn't know if there's multiple assailants, if there's multiple active shooters involved, and so this notion that he would just rush in without understanding and without assessing, which is now being interpreted as some sort of failure to act or dereliction of duty, when the Supreme Court has ruled that the police don't have a duty to protect, and it does come down to the training. There's been so much movement and evolution with regard to school shootings because of the prevalence, and so we now know post-incident, just from all of the investigations that have taken place, that there were systemic failures associated with this event, and which include communications, include technology. You had over 400 law enforcement officers that responded to this. Not one of them went in for 77 minutes, and 2 out of 400 are being prosecuted for this. One who's the chief, and then you have Mr. Gonzales here, who was one of 4 initial responders on scene.
Right.
And so there's a lot to unpack here and to understand about this prosecution.
Yeah, let's bring Philip Dubé into the conversation. We've got Josh saying it's an over-prosecution. We have Charles saying it is scapegoating. Do you agree? And what about the 77 minutes? I think that number is just hard to wrap your head around.
I do agree. He is absolutely being scapegoated in this case. There is absolutely no good reason why the state of Texas is going after him criminally. Civilly, I could see a cause of action against the entire police force, school resource police, and so on. But as to him individually, I don't think it's there. Ultimately, what the state has to prove is that he intentionally abandoned these children. Not that he was slow in the uptake, not that he could have done more, but that he legally abandoned these children and the teachers. And I don't think it's there. What people need to keep in mind is that part of their tactical maneuvers and their training is to deal with what has been called the fatal funnel. When you are coming across a tight threshold, a tight doorway, or any tight space where you have this type of high power gun power going off like this, what was like an AK style rifle, it is very likely that you're going to be harmed yourself. And essentially what the state is asking all law enforcement to do is to give up their lives when it might not be safe to do so. So I think the systemic failure, if we're all really honest, was not with the school resource officer. It's with the system itself not being prepared for school shootings in general. And to suggest that this lone school officer could have somehow prevented the deaths of 19 kids and 2 teachers is not realistic. What I want to know is, let's just pretend hypothetically that he would have sprung into action immediately. The test is, at that point, how many people would have died anyway? You would not have been able to prevent all death. So even assuming he had done everything that he could have in a timely manner, there still would have been death.
Yeah, but I've got to stand up for this as well. In order to get civil liability, we really do need to consider why the state of Texas is doing this theater and prosecuting. And that's because there has to be accountability, and the state of Texas does need to show it's doing something. Texas is a unique state in the way that they rely on their courts, oftentimes for almost public policy reasons. And there is a justification, and I'll just say this, you have to prosecute someone in order to get change. And if you want to change how officers in schools relate to their duties, unfortunately, this may be how they get there, by prosecuting an officer into higher standards across the system. And that's a kind of long way around it. But if they're not going to get action through the legislature, Texas is a very polarized state, this may be more, instead of a prosecution against an individual, a statement by the law enforcement and prosecutorial authorities. We need to do more. This is how we're going to get it.
Let's really quick listen back to something the defense said in their opening, telling these jurors really that they're apologizing in advance for everything that they are going to see.
They're going to show you the worst things that you've ever seen. You will not come out of this trial the same person in your heart. I'm not. They're not. They're not. They're not. It's traumatic. They're not. Nobody will ever be the same. And we're not comparing what we've seen, but you can't imagine the pain. And what the prosecution wants you to do is see that, see those horrible things, and get so mad at Adrian that you can pick them.
Now, Charles, he's trying there to make sure he connects empathetically with this jury, but this is something that they are going to see. They're seeing the shooter's actions alongside this trial for an officer.
Yeah, it really is. It's horrendous that, you know, sort of adding to what Josh is saying about the motivation for this prosecution, to consider the fact that you have at least 12, 13 individual citizens who are going to be exposed to this horror for the sake of potential policy change in lieu of trying to achieve that in a more productive way. And then the family members who are going to have to relive this. All of these victims' family members are going to relive this. So when you look at the sort of the collateral damage associated with this prosecution, and because of its suspected motivation of accountability and bringing about some change in lieu of saying, hey, what happened here is unthinkable. Clearly there are systemic failures. We need to look at this. We commit to the citizens of Texas that we will endeavor to do everything in our power to learn every lesson that we can. We will bring in all the best experts in the world, invest all the resources necessary to achieve an end where none of these deaths have been in vain, that we will be assured moving forward that all of our schools in the state of Texas will be safer as a result of that.
I think that's what they want, that these deaths are not in vain. We're going to keep talking about this case. Stand by to our power panel. The latest that, of course, we've learned in this case is that tomorrow the jurors aren't even going to be coming in for testimony because there was a pause in everything when there was an argument about a Brady Act violation. The defense saying the prosecution didn't turn over something. So tomorrow the judge is going to decide whether this is a mistrial or to admonish the state if they find there was wrongdoing in discovery. Let's get to our own break. On the other side, we're going to stay with this case and we're going to focus on the evidence, see what our power panel thinks about what is being presented against this defendant. Don't go anywhere.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, the murders of Rob and Michelle Reiner and the case against their own son. We're unpacking everything you need to know before tomorrow's big hearing.
Closing Arguments, tonight at 8, 7 Central, only on Court TV. 8 hours of back-to-back true crime cases every Saturday.
This is crazy.
On America's original true crime obsession. 48 hours on Court TV. Saturday starting at 4, 3 Central on Court TV.
Was it confusion or criminal negligence? That's the question in front of a Texas jury in the school shooting case where the shooter is not the one on trial. The evidence in cases like this one are some of the worst imaginable. But how does that carnage get used in court when the defendant manned the team that killed the gunman? Today was day one in the case against a former Uvalde school police officer, Adrian Gonzales, who prosecutors say waited entirely too long to act. Here's what our court of opinion team chose as today's best evidence to the jury. It came through the first witness to take the stand, an eyewitness named Gilbert Limones. He opted not to be shown on camera. He called 911 though when this happened. He saw the gunman approach the school, and let's listen to some of that recording. It's so emotional. It played in court today.
Listen to the guy, he's on the school. He's in the back. He's got the TNT at the school. Okay, then we do
Absolutely gut-wrenching to listen to. Let's bring in our power panel to talk about it. We've got Josh Schiffer, Charles Millestad, and Philip Dubé with us. Philip, I'm actually going to start with you out in Los Angeles. What does evidence like this do to a jury?
It brings them to the scene. They can feel, they can perceive, and they can actually taste and smell the terror and the horror, just like that caller experienced. So you want the jury basically to experience and sort of relive what that caller went through. The real question is, though, what does it really prove other than maybe upset the jury? Because if we're really honest about it, it does not prove any dereliction of duty on the part of former school officer Gonzales. At most, all it does is really sort of set the table for what's going to come in terms of all the fatalities and all the injuries. So I'm not even sure it really proves much.
Josh Schiffer, what do you think about that? If it not proving anything, but perhaps being very compelling to this jury, we know that the defense likely tried to keep it out as much as possible as irrelevant, but that didn't work.
Yeah, it's the compelling nature that aids the state in its presentation. When you're presenting a story, the real tradition is linear. It's the once upon a time, and then A, then B, then C. That's a great way to tell a thorough story, but if you're trying to grab a jury and engage them, begin with the action. You start with something right out front like this, unbelievably traumatic. Hard to listen to. You are listening to children being killed. Like, this is as awful as it gets. No one's looking away. That jury's keyed in to the state's initial arguments.
Yeah, we understand they were taking notes, very attentive today.
Irreplaceable value for the state prosecution.
You can hear in his voice, Charles, that he is desperate for someone to get there to protect the kids. And you can even just tell in his voice and his tone, he's expecting once police get there, they are going to run in and stop this. And that's what didn't happen here, and that's perhaps why we have this prosecution. We wanted, apparently, according to the prosecution, him to run into that perhaps fatal funnel.
Absolutely. It's excruciating. But it's the perspective of a lay witness, not a trained law enforcement person, who is observing something in real time without having a full understanding, a tactical understanding of what needs to happen next in terms of how to approach the scene, in terms of particularly what's being communicated to Resource Officer Gonzales. what that radio traffic is like, what he's being told, what his perspective is, his point of observation. And so we're just getting a lay witness's observation and their horror in what they're seeing. And so all of that emotionalism, again, is so moving and so horrifying, but it does not, as I think as has been said, it does not relate directly to Officer Gonzales's actions or inactions in this case.
Even though it is the setup for the betrayal that I think is the next chapter in the story, because one of the things I've discussed with Charles and others is how do you set up the duties of this officer? What are the rules that he's supposed to be playing by? What is he required to do as part of his job? And like Charles said, this is this evidence of what was happening right there.
Broken trust.
Yeah. What happens next?
Like
did this officer fulfill his obligations, or did he betray the people he'd sworn to protect? And is that criminal?
So we're going to look at another piece of physical evidence that was shown to this jury today. This was also during Gilbert Limones' testimony. The court played surveillance video from the school showing that shooter that day. Now, this video shows the school shooter hopping over a fence and approaching the school. And the witness testified that he saw the shooter shooting randomly at school windows. He shot every window, according to this witness, until he got to the point of entry. I mean, it's another one, Charles, of those images that just takes these jurors to the scene. But tell me about what the protocol is. When you're seeing this video and you're knowing that he's already shooting when he's outside, what do you understand about law enforcement protocol in general for these situations?
Well, again, there's an assessment here that's happening. We don't know, this is video surveillance, right? We don't know what any of the law enforcement, of the four initial responding officers, we don't know what their vantage points are. Again, a lot of this we're looking at in retrospect, and we're seeing these things, and it seems very clear. Oh my God, there's a shooter approaching the campus. He's shooting at windows. But the question is, what was known at the time? And part of the betrayal that comes to mind for me is may be a deficiency in training. Like Resource Officer Gonzales may have been betrayed by his own department if he was not adequately trained and he was put in a situation where he wasn't prepared to deal with what was unfolding there. I don't know if that's the case or not, but that is absolutely something that I'd be exploring if I was defending him. What is his training? Was it sufficient? And this is one of the things that should be in a post-analysis world, they should be looking at is where can we do better? Where can the training be supplemented? How were these officers equipped, particularly those four initial responding officers? But then all of the other systemic failures that have already been brought to light with regard to all of these multiple agencies that are showing up, that are trying to get on the same page, that lack the proper communication, they don't have the technology to be singing off the same sheet. That's what's taken 77 minutes.
The defense claimed the radios were not adequate.
Absolutely.
Philip DeBay, I need someone to argue on the side of the prosecution. So I want you to put on a prosecutor hat just for this one, because we've clearly stated, and everyone on the panel has, some of the issues with the prosecution. What do you think they do need to argue, prove, show as evidence in this case that's actually going to get the conviction they're looking for?
That he should have done more to save the lives of others rather than his own. That you take on the role of police officer, school resource officer, it doesn't mean you stand down in the face of AK-style rifle firepower. It means you go in there and you assume that you could lose your life. And if you merely stand down and let all these children and staff die with all that firepower, you are derelict in your duty, and you should never have been given a badge. Period. Now, on the other hand, I think the school, given the zeitgeist, if you will, of all these school shootings, maybe need more cops on campus. When I was coming up in school, we didn't even have school resource officers on campus. And gradually, as crime started getting committed at school, they would bring in one. I have never heard of 2, 3, 4 officers present on campus at all times. But it seems like you need a higher ratio of cops to kids now, just like you need a ratio of teachers to students for teaching purposes. It's sad, but unfortunately, that's the state of affairs we have, given our right to bear arms.
And I think we really need to also remember that this is Texas, and Officer Gonzales took an oath to carry a firearm to protect these children. And if you're going to ask a jury to then put him in jail, you've really got to show what injuries, what crimes were committed because of his lack of action. And that's what this shows. Hey, you were there on scene during this call. When these bullets were flying and these children were being murdered, you were the one who had sworn to protect them. When you fail to fulfill your oath, that's, I think, the emotional hook the state's going to really lock onto, and there will be jurors that appreciate it.
This is a tall order for the prosecution in front of the jury. Thank you all for your opinions on this one. We have to leave it there. But again, court is in session tomorrow. They're in Texas. The jury is not going to be there, but intense arguments are going to be happening that will determine the fate of this trial going forward. Up next, we're going to go beyond the gavel, breaking down the biggest true crime cases. A dentist and his wife killed in their house, their young children inside, and an unidentified killer still on the loose. The crime scene suggests some things. We're going to talk about it on the other side.
The body, our friend wasn't answering his phone. We just did a wellness check. We just came here, and he appears dead.
Okay.
There's blood. He's laying next to his bed, off of his bed, and there's blood.
Let's go beyond the gavel. Before or after they played out in a courtroom with a trial, there are cases that have our attention while they are deep in the investigation phase, and that's the case in the state of Ohio. There's a manhunt going on right now for the person who killed a dentist and his wife in their home while their young children were inside. Spencer and Monique Tepe, they both died by apparent gunshot wounds just 2 days before the new year. Their children were found unharmed. Investigators say there were no weapons or signs of forced entry inside of the home, and who did this remains a mystery. No suspect has been named. Surveillance video shows what police believe is the person of interest seen near the couple's home. And this video shows a man, you see him there in a dark colored hoodie, walking in an alley near the victim's home. Detectives believe that the shooting happened between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. in the upstairs portion of the couple's house. Now, officers discovered the bodies last Tuesday after a welfare check. There was concern for the couple that began earlier that day when the husband's boss called 911 after he didn't show up for work. Take a listen.
Did you receive information that he may have been involved in an accident, or?
No, ma'am. I just know that he is he is always on time, and he would contact us if there was any issues whatsoever. And I just don't know how else to say this. We're very, very concerned because this is very out of character. And we can't get in touch with his wife, which is probably the more concerning thing.
As this manhunt continues, let's bring in our power panel. We have with us attorney Josh Schiffer, defense investigator Charles Milstead, and former public defender in LA County, Philip Dubé, is with us. Great to have you all. Charles, I'm going to start with you on this one. The investigation is going now. We're calling it a manhunt, and we don't know who they're hunting for.
Right. And they have this person of interest, may or may not be the correct person. It may just be somebody happened to be walking by and be captured on a ring camera or something. So it's a manhunt technically right now. The one thing that I think would be really important for law enforcement, I think that it would be a mistake for them to not consider all possibilities, and one in particular. Even though it's been reported that this was a very happily married couple, by all accounts, have two beautiful children, everything is going great, they've only been married for a few years. But if they aren't looking at the possibility that there was some sort of love triangle involved here, there's either one of two things. Either they're going to miss a potential suspect, or they're going to open themselves up to the defense ultimately being able to exploit a deficient investigation. So I would be including, just to be thorough in the investigation, making no assumptions, pursuing all possibilities. I would be looking at phone records, at everything possible for both of these decedents to see what their lifestyles were, if there was anything, and clearly, absent even the possibility of some love triangle, whoever they would have had most recent contact with becomes very important in terms of who they last spoke to in the hours preceding the shootings. And what's curious to me is the fact that it is a non-forced entry. The doctor, dentist, was shot multiple times, which could potentially indicate more aggression towards him, more passion, more anger. His wife was shot 2 times. And so, and it was, I believe he was shot in his bedroom, if I'm not mistaken, which would indicate that it was someone they might have known and may have at gunpoint forced him to the bedroom. There may have been some sort of confrontation, some verbal exchange that ensued. Who knows? But to not consider all of those possibilities would be a mistake and would provide an opening. Either would be at risk of missing something or provide an opening for the defense down the road.
I see Philip DeBay shaking his head at some of those possibilities. The big question, Philip, is, was this random? Was this someone that they knew?
Oh, this was clearly an ambush by someone they knew. This person obviously knew that they would be there, knew their schedule, knew their whereabouts, and had some type of beef or axe to grind. This was not a property-related crime. There was no evidence of forced entry or a home invasion type robbery situation. Nobody was rummaging through cupboards and closets and drawers, etc. This was going in there to get the job done, and only time will tell what exactly was going on within the family dynamics. It could be that maybe there were trysts going on. It could be that money was owed, or who knows. Maybe somebody's dental claim got denied. It wouldn't shock me either. And now you've got a disgruntled patient having to foot the bill for a root canal. Who knows? But it would not surprise me in the least if it really was a disgruntled patient.
Josh, your opinion?
Yeah, Philip is again abusing the word clearly. We've discussed this before, my dear friend. Clearly has nothing to do with this, because it isn't clearly someone that they knew. Because guess what? If you're really going to, as Charles suggests, have a full and complete investigation, consider that everybody's a suspect until they've been eliminated, which is what they're supposed to do. There are lots of ways I can show factually someone unknown to them that did not create a break-in or signs of struggle. We've really got to keep an open mind. And yes, we want to jump into salaciousness, but there is a lot of other explanations, such as mental illness, crazy people in the neighborhood, someone who is desperate, someone on the run, someone that they may have known long time ago, someone that has just popped up in their life. There are endless variables, not just attached to this random fella walking in a hoodie. One of my favorite comedians wears a gray hoodie every single day on stage. Doesn't make him a suspect, does it? So really, we've got to step back, stop jumping to conclusions, and really consider the full aspect of who this could have been. We need a full investigation. That's what will get us to the truth.
Shout out to one of my favorite comedians, Josh Johnson.
Favorite comedians.
Charles, what is your opinion when you are watching that video that we've been playing? What do you see when you watch who they believe? We don't know for sure. We've seen situations where they say person of interest, and then that changes.
Yes, we've seen that many a times, and so clearly they have to run this one to ground. They're going to have to figure out who that person is, and ultimately conduct an interview and either rule that person out and realize that they're pursuing the wrong lead and need to. Again, they should be operating with a very open mind in the fashion that Josh just described, where they make no assumptions, where there's zero tunnel vision going on, and they pursue the evidence and the facts where they lead. And so they need to do everything in their power including trying to find any and all ring camera footage. I'm certain they're doing cell tower dumps to see what sort of activity at this time of the night. There should not be a lot of cell phone activity going on. They should be able to identify any active cell phones and movement associated with geolocation data, cell tower data, etc. To try to get to the bottom of this individual's ID and what they were doing. You know, it could be someone 3 doors down who very innocently was, you know, looking for their dog or something.
Oh, well, we absolutely, our heart breaks for those children in this case. We will continue to follow the details there in Ohio and bring you the latest in that manhunt. Our power panel is staying with us. We have to take a break, but coming up, we've got our segment, Hot Takes and Cold Facts for you. Our panel giving us their opinions on today's biggest headlines, including a Hollywood legend's alleged killer son shedding suicide smock. We're going to talk about it, and a case of amnesia for a teenager who was a possible suspect in his stepsister's death. And one state makes domestic abusers a whole lot easier to identify. We'll get into all of it in our panel's next takes coming up.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, the murders of Rob and Michelle Reiner and the case against their own son. We're unpacking everything you need to know before tomorrow's big hearing.
Closing Arguments, tonight at 8, 7 Central, only on Court TV.
Welcome back to Court of Opinion. Our experts, they have strong takes on all of the trials we bring you here on Court TV. Now we want to get to their hot takes on the big legal headlines developing today. And because we want to get to everyone and make sure that we get to all of these cases, just like in a court of law, we're giving our seasoned panel a certain time limit to make their arguments, 25 seconds on the clock to state their case. Before we get to their hot takes, here are the cold, hard facts on our first headline. This is according to NBC4 News in Los Angeles. Jail officials say that Nick Reiner is no longer under suicide watch while behind bars. Now, Reiner appeared in a suicide smock back in December. This was his first court appearance after being charged with killing his parents, filmmaker and actor Rob Reiner and photographer Michelle Reiner. Now, the 32-year-old Reiner is being held without bail. His arraignment was delayed at that December appearance, but it goes forward tomorrow. Let's bring in our guest panel to get their takes. We've got attorney Josh Schiffer, investigator Charles Milstead, and attorney Philip Dubé with us. Charles, let me start with you on this one. 25 seconds on the clock. What do you think that means in terms of them taking him off of the watch?
It's an assessment thing, generally speaking, with detention centers. They, in a high-risk or a high-profile case like this, with these facts and the history of this this defendant, it's a precaution that they take until they have a chance to evaluate him. He's clearly been evaluated now, and they've made the determination that he's no longer a potential threat to himself, and so the schmuck comes off and things move forward.
All right, Josh Schiffer, what do you think about this change and if it impacts his defense at all?
Oh, it's definitely involved in the defense because optics is everything. And here's what you've got. Someone with known schizophrenic issues who's accused of a horrific murdering parent kind of crime. When you lock him up, there's a little bit of deregulation. Give him a few days and enough pills that they force down his throat, he's probably a lot more calm. Doesn't deserve that, and it's expensive to keep people in the padded cell.
Let's move to Philip Dubé. Philip, what is his attorney Alan Jackson going to do tomorrow at arraignment?
Well, I think he's probably going to be a little worried, to be honest with you, because I think that he had hoped that he might have an insanity defense. But given the fact that he was an admitted sort of polysubstance abuser, my hunch is that he was in jail long enough to come down off the meth hangover and the meth withdrawals. And if you're not having symptoms of psychosis where you need antipsychotic type medication, that what you're really left with is just a drug problem.
And Philip, that's the time. We got to step to the next story. Thank you for your comments. Let's move to this one, story number 2. This is a teen boy who is reportedly being investigated as a possible suspect in the death of his sister, Hannah Kepner. This is that mystery on the Carnival cruise ship. He reportedly says he can't remember anything related to what happened on that cruise or her death. Her body was found in the ship's cabin that she shared with her stepbrother in November. The 16-year-old was hospitalized after the family returned to Port Miami. He's no longer living with his family, according to court documents at the custody hearings in this case. No one has been charged yet in her death. Josh Schiffer, 25 seconds. Why has no one been charged yet?
There's not a lot of mystery. I know we have to say mystery, but as far as everything I've read, I've made up my mind probably about who was responsible for this. There's not going to be crimes charged because this happened in international water and nobody saw anything. Cruise ships, they don't want to deal with liability, and no one in the family is going to help lock up their loved young son who did something horrific. These are the most complicated cases for the state to prove because ain't no one going to cooperate.
Philip Dubé, your take on the amnesia defense, potentially.
Oh, I think it means one of three things. Either he truly does not remember, and maybe he was under the influence of their alcohol or drugs or both. What else? That he doesn't want to speak, period. He's invoking, essentially. And he could also be saying that he doesn't want to get it all into his complicity. So by remaining silent, there's not going to be any additional evidence to use against him.
Yeah, these were in text messages with his family in those custody hearings. Charles, what do you think is happening in the investigation and why we haven't seen charges?
Again, there's a lack of evidence, and I think there's probably also some toxicology results that they're waiting on. But I actually think there's a potential for a legitimate defense here with regard. I mean, if we ever got to that point, with regard to the withdrawals. I mean, he was on ADHD medication, he was on insomnia medication, and there are legitimate medical phenomena where when you come off of those, and his mother testified that he was.
That's the time. I got to cut you off, Charles, but you were making a good take. Let's move to Tennessee. They are leading the way. The nation's first registry of domestic abusers takes effect there. It's a new state law that's called, it requires the TBI, the Texas Bureau of Investigation, to maintain a database of people convicted of at least 2 domestic violence offenses. And they say it could help prevent future violence by making repeat abusers easier to identify. According to Tennessee Voices for Victims, Tennessee ranks number 4 in states where men kill women. Philip Dubé, I'm going to start with you. 25 seconds on the clock because you're already shaking your head on this one. Philip, go. Your time is
Waste of time, waste of legislation for 2 reasons. Okay, waste of time, waste of legislation. And the legal reason why is that victims know who their batterers are. Usually you need a database to identify forensic evidence that's been left behind at a scene. You don't know who it is. So if you have someone who's prone to arson, predatory sex offenses, that's how you get them, because they're in the database.
Charles Milstead, what do you think about this new registry?
I think it's going to have a chilling effect on these domestic violence cases. I think it's going to lead to less pleas. Prosecutors are going to be forced to have to make their cases because of the risk of being on a registry, in the same way that defendants don't want to be on a sex offender registry and will fight tooth and nail not to appear on one. And so I think it's going to have a counter effect on its intentions, essentially.
Now, Josh Schiffer, this is a big deal. This is the first state to do it. Do you think other states are going to follow with this? And how are we even going to examine whether this works?
They're going to follow it after seeing exactly what happens, because Charles makes a great point about the chilling and how it's going to get manipulated, who's on this registry or not. Let's talk about the registry. You get on it after your second domestic violence? There's already a registry called the clerk's office, and you can just go look up who's been convicted already.
Yeah.
We don't need, now he's got a 2-fer. How about a 1-fer? How about you've been convicted of domestic violence? We already take away your Second Amendment rights at that point. Go on forever.
Great takes from everyone. Our thanks to our power panel. We have Charles Milstead, who's with us, Josh Schiffer, and Philip Dubé. Appreciate you guys. Have a great evening. And thank you for connecting with us this hour here on Court of Opinion. I'm Julia Janae, reminding you, while we all have opinions, they should be rooted in facts. And if we have someone that we disagree with, we should at least respect their opinion when we can.